Hello friends, today we are gonna create this beautiful chat application using React and Firebase. We will be able to create a new user or login. After that we will see this chat page. There are the latest conversations here. We can click on them to see messages or search for any user to start a new conversation. I can send a text, I can send an image, and all these operations are real time. Let's log into the second user's chat and see how fast it is. And also, if someone else writes anything to us, we are gonna see it here immediately with the latest message. It's a perfect project to learn React and the latest version of Google Firebase. And finally, we are gonna deploy this application using a hosting service. To do that, we will be using Hostinger. It's my favorite hosting provider and the sponsor of this video. I've been using their services for 2 years and never had a single issue. I've deployed all my websites on their servers and they are really fast. You can use just one hosting for many websites. And also you are gonna get a free domain and free SSL certificate at this price. It's amazing. And if you have some large applications that require more memory and more space, you can prefer a VPS server. After selecting the best option for you, choose your time period here, and if you use the link in the description below or LlamaDev coupon code here, you are gonna get an extra discount. After choosing the payment method and purchasing, you are gonna redirect it to Hostinger panel. So let's claim our free domain and set up our hosting. I'm gonna write a domain name. After the registration, it's ready to use. So let's set up the hosting, build a website. I'll start from scratch and choose my new domain. And we can finish the setup. It's gonna take a while, and right after that you are gonna see your H panel. It's really user friendly. You can manage your domains, your folders and files. And this file manager is my favorite. You are gonna see how easy to deploy any website in a minute. So if you are ready, let's create our app and deploy it here using this manager. Okay, if you created a new folder, let's get started. Firstly, we are gonna install a React app. To do that, of course, you can use npx create react app. But if you do that, there will be many unnecessary files here. You are gonna waste your time deleting all those folders and files. Instead, you can use my GitHub repository, YouTube 2022, and here, as you can see, there is a branch which is React Mini. We are gonna install this branch. To do that, I'm gonna come here and copy this link, and I will say git clone. We are gonna install only one branch, so I will say single branch. And it's gonna be React Mini. And I'm gonna paste my link, and finally I will say dot, that because I want to install everything in this folder. I will enter, and as you can see they are here. But we don't have our node modules. To install our libraries, I will just say yarn. Or if you are using npm, you can say npm install. It's gonna take a while, but before, let's see what we are gonna create. As you can see, when we visit our application, we are gonna see this login page, and also there's a register page, and if there's a user, we are gonna see the home page. But before, let's create this register and login page. As you can see, it's ready. And if you check inside, as you can see, it's really clean. There is nothing unnecessary. It's perfect for beginning. I will say yarn start. And this is our application. Let's create here pages, and inside we are gonna have login page, register page, and home page. Let's close this and create register page. I'm gonna call this component here Okay, it's here. Perfect. Let's see what we are gonna have. Firstly, we are gonna have a container here. We are gonna give this background color, and after that we are gonna create this wrapper. We will give some padding. It's gonna be white background and other elements inside. Let's do that. Let me close this sidebar and terminal. Okay, let's come here. I will say class name is gonna be form container. Actually, let's use it like that. And inside, one more div. And it's gonna be form wrapper. And inside this, we are gonna create our form. Let's check. It's gonna include, of course, it's a register page. It's gonna include 4 inputs. 3 of them are text input, and this one is file input. When we click this, as you can see, it's opening folders. Let's do that. Input text, input email, input password, and input file. Let's give some placeholder. It's gonna be display name, email, and password. And there is a logo here and a title, small title. I forgot them before this form. I'm gonna add them. So I will say spam, let's say llama chat, and one more, and it's gonna be register, and let's say title, for example. And after this input, I'm gonna create a button, and it's gonna say sign up. And finally, there is a text here. Let's say p tag and this text. Of course, we are gonna use link here, but we are not gonna use anchor tag. After, when we install React Rotterdam, we are gonna see this link here. Let's check our app. Okay, they are here. By the way, there is no button. I didn't save. Okay, it's here and it's here. Let's give background color for the container and center this wrapper. To do that, you can use CSS, but I want to use Sass here. Our application is not that big. I think we can write everything inside one CSS file. And using Sass is the better option here. I think I will say yarn add or npm install Sass. Let's create our file here. I will say style.scss, and we are going to use this file everywhere, so I can import this here. Style.scss. Okay, what was our class name? Container. Firstly, let's give our background color. It's gonna be this blue color, like that. I want to make this 100%. I'll say H 103H, so it's gonna be full screen. And to center them, I'm gonna use flexbox. I will say display flex, align item center. It's gonna center vertically, and justify content center is gonna center horizontally. Okay, perfect. I can do the same thing for this form, but this time I'm gonna use flex direction column. That because they are gonna be vertical. Let's say wrapper first. And this is the best feature of Sass. You can write your children inside your parents, and it prevents a lot of conflict. I highly recommend you to use it. And what I was saying, okay, form. I'll say display flex again, but flex direction will be column. Let's give some space between them. I will say gap 15 pixels, like that. Let's give background color for this wrapper and some padding inside. I will say background color is gonna be white, and padding will be 20 from top and bottom, 60 from left and right, like that. I can give some border radius here, and again flexbox and give some space between them. Firstly, I will say border radius is gonna be 10 pixels, display flex, flex direction column, and gap will be 10 pixels, like that. Perfect. But let's center them. Align item center. Okay, awesome. What about this logo and this title? I will say logo color will be this dark blue, Font weight will be bold, and font size will be a little bit bigger, like that. And for this one, I'm gonna give exactly the same color, but font size will be smaller. Okay, let's give some padding inside those inputs. Inside form, this is our parent. I'll say input, padding 15 pixels, like that. But I want to delete this border. Instead, I'm just gonna give bottom border. It's gonna be none, but border bottom is gonna be the main background color. Let's close them again. Actually, I can separate them and you can see better. Okay, and I didn't give here size, 1 pixel, solid, and this color, like that. If you want to, you can give here any width, like that. Those placeholder texts are really dark. I didn't like them. Let's change it. I'll say placeholder, color will be RGB, a little bit softer like that. And what about this button? Again, I will delete border and change the background color. It's inside our form. Let's check. Okay, it's ending here, so I can write like that. I'll say background color and text color will be white. I will give some padding inside and font weight will be bold, like that. I forgot deleting border and cursor pointer. Okay, awesome. For this p tag, this is the form. It's outside the form, so I'm gonna write it here. It's gonna be blue color, font size will be small, and I'm gonna give margin between this text and this button, let's say 10 pixels. Okay, perfect. But as you realize, in the real app, we are using this image and this text instead of this ugly button. What I'm gonna do is to hide this input and create a label which represents this file input. What I mean by that? Let's come here. I will say label. As you can see, it says HTML4. Basically, we can create here any ID. Let's say file or whatever you say. And if I say file here, same ID, whatever I write here, any text, any image, doesn't matter. It's gonna represent this file input. Let's test. I'm gonna click, and as you can see, it opens my folder. So if I come here and say inner style and display none. As you can see, it's not here anymore, but I can use this as a file input. Of course, you can give here any class name and write it here, but I just want to show you how you can use inner style. Okay, so instead of this text, I will say image. We are gonna use this image and this text. Let's create here image folder. And I'm gonna push here all my images. We are gonna use this one. Okay, this one. Let's import this. Import, add from images and add avatar.png. Let's use it here. Span, add an avatar. Like that. But I want to center them. To do that, I'm gonna give here display flags and align item center. Let's come back. After this button, I'm gonna say label, display flags, align item center, like that. And I will give some space here and change this font size and color. So let's say gap 10 pixels, color will be light color, font size will be smaller, like that. And let's say cursor pointer that we can click. Okay, perfect. What about this image? It's too big. It's inside label. I'm gonna say with 32 pixels, like that. What about this login page? Let's check here. As you can see, it uses exactly the same template, so it's going to be much easier. Let me shrink this. I will copy everything here and paste inside login. Of course, I'm going to change here. My component name will be login, and we are going to need only email and password, so I'm going to delete here. And it's going to be sign in. And you don't have an account, so register. I'm going to come here and call my component to see. Like that. As you can see, perfect. That's all. So what about the home page? Let me close this one and close everything here. I'm gonna open home page. Of course, to see changes, I'm gonna call it here. Of course, we don't have any function yet. Okay, it's here. Let me log in here. What was the email? I forgot. Okay, this one. As you can see, we have many components here. Our sidebar, this chat panel. Inside this chat panel, we are going to have our messages, this input. So basically, writing all those components inside only this component is not a good idea. It's better to separate them into small components. So I will come here and say components. Firstly, we are going to have this sidebar, this chat. Let's create. Inside this sidebar, we are going to have this navbar, this search bar, and those chats. Let's say navbar, search, and chats. And what about here? We are going to have individual messages and this input panel. Of course, you can separate more components, but it's enough, I think. It's not a big application. We don't need to worry about performance that much. Of course, we should, but it's just couple components. We are just gonna refresh those chats and those messages. That's all. Okay, let's get started. Firstly, inside homepage, I'm gonna create this container. Let's come back. Let's say class name, home, and here I will say container. And inside we are going to have this sidebar and this chat panel. Of course, we didn't create functions for them. Let's do that quickly. Okay. Let's say sidebar and chat component. Let's see. Okay, as you can see, they are here. Let's give some style for this component. I'm gonna open again style file and create here homepage. Again, background color, exactly the same color. Height will be 100 VH. I'm gonna do exactly the same thing here. Like that. And after I will create container inside this home. We are not gonna have any border or background, but for now, to just see better, I will give border 1 pixel solid and let's say white. And let's give some border radius 10 pixels. And right now I will give some width and height. You can arrange this for yourself. It really doesn't matter. I just gave 65% and height 80%. You can make it full screen or smaller or bigger, whatever you want. And right now I want to separate the sidebar and chat. They are gonna be horizontal, but sidebar will be smaller chat space will be bigger. Like that. As you can see, this is 1 unit, this is 2 units. We can do this using Flexbox easily. Let's say display flex. As you can see, they are horizontal. Let's go to sidebar. I'll say class name is going to be sidebar. And for this chat, and I'm going to say sidebar and chat. As I said, it's going to be 1 unit, so I can use flex here. And it's going to be 2. As you can see, it's twice bigger than sidebar. Perfect. Let's give a border here and you can see better. I will say border, but it's going to be only border right. 1 pixel solid and this dark color. Like that. Actually, I can give background color here. It's going to be exactly the same color. So we can delete this border. Okay, perfect. But as you realize, this corner is still sharp. That's because it's overflowing. If you remember, our container has a border radius. To prevent this overflow, I will say overflow hidden. Like that. Okay. Before this chat, let's take care of this sidebar. I'm gonna open up navbar. Let's call it here first. Okay, it's not coming. Let's import. Okay, it's here. Let's open up. And let's see what we are gonna have. Firstly, we are gonna have our logo. And after that, we are gonna have a div here which includes this avatar, username, and logout button. I will say class name, navbar. Let's say span, logo. It's gonna be your application name. After that, let's create user div. And it's gonna include image, span, let's say John, and a button. It's gonna be logout. Like that. Let's make them horizontal. I'm gonna go to style. Inside sidebar, we have a navbar first. It's a container and it's gonna be display flags, align item center. Let's make this background color darker and you can see better. Background color. Like that. And I want to give a height here. It's gonna be 50 pixels. Okay. And some padding because it's really close here. And I want to separate this logo and this div. So I will say justify content space between. As you can see, it separated them. By the way, let's change color. Actually, I regret that I didn't create color variables, but okay, it can stay. We don't have that much component. And if I update this repository or if someone sent them to me, I can update them and it will be better. But anyway, as I said, it's not a huge design. For this logo, it's gonna be bold. I will say logo like that. And user div, again, display flags, and I'm gonna give some gap between them like that. And for this image, we don't have yet, but let's give background color for now. It can be this light color, and I will say height 24, width 24, and border radius will be 50%, like that. And of course, to crop this image properly, I'm gonna say object width and cover. Okay, what about this button? After image, again background color. Color will be this light color and font size will be really small. I want to delete all those borders like that, and it's gonna be clickable, so it's gonna be cursor pointer. Okay, perfect. Let's find here quickly an image. Let's use this woman here. Navbar, image, Okay, perfect. So what about this part? As you remember, there's a search bar here. Let's create. I'm gonna close this navbar, and inside sidebar, I will say search components. Okay, it's not coming again. Something is wrong. I will say search, and it's here. So what we are gonna have here, let's check. As you can see, there's an input, and when we search for something, we are gonna show this user something like that. I'm gonna open search. Let's give class name. Firstly, we are gonna have search form, and inside we are gonna have our input. And after this form, I'm gonna create a div. It's gonna be user chat. Let's say image. I'm gonna paste exactly the same image, and user chat info, and one more span, and it's gonna be display name. Let's say Jane. Okay, it's really huge. Let's take care about this. Inside navbar, I will say search border, but it's gonna be only border bottom, 1 pixel, solid, and gray. And inside we have search form. Inside we have an input, and I will not write this user chat here, that because it's common. Instead, I'm gonna come here and write it here outside of search, but it's still inside sidebar. Let's take care about this image first, and we can see better after that. I will say 50, height 50, border radius. Okay, it's still the same. Oh, I'm writing inside navbar. Of course, it should be sidebar. So I'm gonna move them like that. Okay, perfect. As you can see, this image is pretty weird. Let's give object fit like that. Okay, awesome. Let's give some padding for this search form. And inside this input, I'm gonna say background color transparent. As you can see, like that. Let's delete this border here, and color will be white. So when we write something, we are gonna see it like that. But I want to get rid of this outline like that, and let's give here placeholder. I will say placeholder find a user, and I want to change this color also. Placeholder color will be light gray. Okay, it's much better, I think. So what about this user chat? Let's give padding again, display flags, align item center. I'm gonna give gap between them like that. Color will be white, and cursor will be pointer. Like that. And when I hover over this user chat, I'm gonna change the background color. So let's say hover, background color will be our dark color. Let's check. Okay, perfect. And in our application, as you can see, we have many users here. Let's create them. I'm gonna open up sidebar again and chats component. Let's create here. I'm not writing those users here directly, that because whenever we refresh these users, that because when we add here some message or when we receive any message, this list will be refreshed. So I don't want to re-render this search component and navbar component. That's why we are using different component. So I'm gonna open up chats component, and let's give class name. And I'm gonna copy here and paste inside. But there's a difference here, that because when we search for any user, there will be no message here. but in our conversations, we are gonna have latest message. So I'm gonna add one more thing, and it's gonna be, let's say, p tag hello. Let's open up style again, and let's change this. By the way, this is gonna be bold. I forgot that. So what was the parent? User chat info. After this image, I will say span and p tag. This is gonna be username, font size a little bit bigger, and font weight will be bolder. And for this one, font size will be 14 and color will be light gray. Like that. Let's create some more users here. It's just the design, of course, we are gonna delete them later. Okay. Okay, this is capital, this is capital. It's not that much important, but anyway. Okay, perfect. So what about this chat component? Again, we are gonna have this top bar. Of course, we don't have any video calling feature or friendship feature, but it looks nice. And maybe in the future we are gonna create. So let's come here. I'm gonna close everything and open up chat and style. Let's create here chat info. It's gonna be top bar. I'm gonna create here span. It's gonna be username, and we are gonna have some icons. Let's say chat icons. Oops. And inside we are gonna have 3 images. I will import them quickly. First one will be camera, second one will be add friend icon, and more icon. Like that. Okay, let's give some style. Chat is here, and I will say chat info. Again, height will be 50 pixels. Let's give background color. Display will be flex. Align item center, like that. And again, I'm gonna separate them. Chain will be here and div will be here. So I'm gonna say justify content, space between, like that. Of course, I can give some padding, and text color will be light gray. And what about those icons? Chat icons, display flags. I'm gonna give some gap. And for each icon, I'm gonna limit their heights. It's gonna be 24 pixels and cursor pointer, like that. Okay, so far so good. So what about messages? We have a top bar here and input component. And when we refresh our messages, we don't want to re-render those components. So let's create messages component. Messages. Class name, I will say messages, and it's gonna include a couple of message. If you remember, we have a component here. We are gonna call it here a couple times. Let's import. Okay, I want to call it here. Oops. Oh, sorry, I forgot here our folder, and it's gonna be inside chat, not chat info. Okay, perfect. And finally, we are gonna have here input component. Like that. Let's change this background color. Here is the chat. It's gonna be here, messages, and background color will be our light color. And again, let's give padding. Okay, we are gonna take care of those messages, but before, I want to show you how we can arrange this messages height To do that, firstly, I want to create this input. Let's open up input and give a class name. Okay, it can stay like that. And here I will just say input, height will be 50 pixels and background color will be white. Okay, it can stay like that. We are gonna handle this later. But before, let's calculate these messages height. As you can see, this is 50 pixels. But if you remember, it has 10 pixels padding, 10 from top, 10 from bottom. It means this top bar is 70 pixels. It's gonna be exactly the same thing for this input. It's gonna have padding 10 pixels also. So height 50 pixels, 10 pixels padding here, 10 pixels padding here, it's 70 pixels. So if I come here and say height, calculate 100% minus 160 pixels, that's because we have 20 pixels padding here also, it's gonna give this full screen. Of course, there are other ways to do that, but I just want to show you how you can use calculate properly. And I want you to be careful about paddings and margins. You have to calculate them. Okay, let's take care of this input. It's easier, I think. As you can see, we have an input here, 2 icons and 1 button. But again, it's gonna open up our folder. So basically, we are gonna do exactly the same thing here. I'm gonna go to input, input text, placeholder, type something. And I'm gonna create a div here. It's gonna be send, and it's gonna include our icons and send button. I will say image. It's gonna be our first image. And I'm gonna create here an input, and it's gonna be file. I will say style, display none. And remember, we are giving an ID here to use it inside label, HTML for file, and inside another image. And finally, we are gonna have a button, and it's gonna say send. Let's import those images and use them here. And this one will be this one, like that. Okay, let's make them horizontal and center all those items. I'm gonna come here and say display flags, align item center, and justify content will be space between. Like that. Let's delete this border and outline. I will say input. Remember, this is our class name here. And this is the HTML element. I'm not writing dot here. Let's make this 100% so we can click it everywhere inside this long area. And I will say border none, outline none, and I'm gonna change the font color, and font size will be bigger, like that. Let's change this color also. I'm gonna say placeholder, color will be light gray. Okay, what about this div? If you remember, we have a send div here, we can use it. After this input, I'm gonna say send class. Again, it's gonna be centered, and I will give some space between them, like that. And for those images, let's reduce their sizes. I will say 24 pixels and cursor pointer, like that. And for this button, there will be no border. I'm gonna give some padding. It's gonna be 10 from top and bottom, 15 from left and right. Color will be white, that's because we are gonna change background color, and it's gonna be, let's say, this color. Okay, awesome. So let's take care of those messages. I'm gonna open up message component, and I will say message, but there is something important here, that because as you can see there are two types of messages. First one will be this white one and second one is this blue one. So basically I'm gonna need here a condition, but I'm gonna make this later. That's because we don't have any user, we don't have any data. So inside this message, we are gonna have message info, which includes this avatar and this date. And secondly will be message content, and it's gonna include this text. And if there is an image, we are gonna show it inside this div. So I will say message info and message content. Inside this info, we are gonna have an image. Let's use the same image. And I will say span just now. And here we are gonna have a p tag. I will say hello. And if there's an image, we are gonna show it here. Again, I'm gonna paste this image. Okay, let's take care of them. Inside messages, I will say message. It's gonna be display flags and gap between user information and message content. And first one will be user information, which is message info. And second one will be content. And inside we have an image. I want to quickly change those image sizes, that because as you can see they are really big. Let's say 40 pixels. And object width. And for other image, width will be 50%, so it's not gonna be full screen like that. Okay, of course it's a really big image. What I want to do is to delete this image for now to see our messages better. After that we can activate. So what about this message info? As you can see, they are horizontal. I want to change this. This is message info. I'm gonna go there and say display flags, flags direction column, and I want to change the color. It's gonna be gray, and font weight will be a little bit thinner like that. And there is no space between them. Let's say margin bottom like that. And as you can see, it's overflowing here. So what I want to do is to go to parent here and overflow scroll. So if it doesn't fit inside this component, we will be able to scroll like that. Okay, so what about this content? I just want to give here a limit, that because we can write really long message here. So I will say maximum width is gonna be, let's say 80%. Again, display flags, flags direction column. Remember, it includes text and image. I'm gonna give space between them. And for the p tag, which is our text, I'm gonna give background color. It's gonna be white. Let's give some padding. And I want to change this border radius. This side will be really sharp, but for other edges, I'm gonna give some radius. To do that, I will say border radius. Top left will be 0. We are not gonna have any, but others will be 10 pixels. Like that. But if I add here one more class name, let's say owner, I want to change their style. Message here. Inside this message, I'm gonna say if it's message, but at the same time it's owner, I'm gonna change the direction. To do that, I'm gonna use display flags, but this time I'm gonna change only direction. Flags direction is gonna be row again, it's gonna be horizontal, but this time it's gonna be reverse. Like that. For this text, I'll say p tag, background color will be, let's say this color, and text color will be white. Like that. Border radius 10 pixels, 0 pixel, 10 and 10. Like that. It looks pretty good, but if we add our images back, as you can see, we have a problem here. To prevent this, I will go to p tag again. Actually, let's come here and I will say maximum width is gonna be maximum content. So it's gonna be maximum the length of this text, not bigger. And to move all those elements here, I'm gonna come here, by the way, of course, this p tag inside message content. And I will say align items, flex end. So it's gonna be end of the screen, like that. Perfect. It looks pretty nice. So we finished our design. Right now we are gonna need an authentication first. By the way, before starting, I want to show you how you can create responsive styles. Of course, this is not gonna be fully responsive. I just want to show you how you can do this. I'm gonna come here and create a sass function. To do that, we are gonna be using mixin. And for example, for mobile devices, we are gonna be using media query, and I'm gonna write here my condition, and it's gonna be maximum width 480 pixels. And inside we are gonna write our contents. I can do the same thing for others, for example, for tablets and for laptops, for example. Let's change here. Like that. Of course you can give more. And let me show you how you can do this. I will come here and say include tablet, and inside I'm gonna write my style, and it's gonna be display none. Let's see. I'm gonna open my console. I will shrink. Okay. This is form. Of course it's gonna be inside homepage, our container, navbar, and logo here. And right now, as you can see, there is no logo anymore. Like that. It's that easy. What else we can do here? For example, we can move this logo out to here, but before we can maybe make this container larger. Let's copy this. And if you remember, we have a container here, and it was 65%, but this time, let's say 90%. As you can see, it looks much better. What about this logout button? Here, I will just say position absolute, and I'm gonna give its position bottom 10 pixels. But if we do that, as you can see, it appears here, but it's supposed to be here. To prevent this problem, the parent should be position relative. What's our parent? This sidebar. So I'm gonna go to sidebar, and I will say position relative. As you can see, it's here. And you can do the same thing for mobile devices. For example, you can only show those images, you can delete this text and this username, whatever you want. I just want to show you how you can do this. And maybe one more thing I can show, and it's sass variables. You can create your variables basically like that, $, and for example, dark color. And this color, for example. And I can use this color wherever I want. Like that. It's that easy. Okay, it's not that important. I don't want to waste time with this design. Let's take care of authentication. Of course, to do that, we should create a Firebase application. To do that, I'm going to go to Firebase, get started. Let's create a project. This is our previous project, if you remember. And I will say just chat. I'm going to create my project. It's going to take a while, and after that, we are going to initialize our Firebase application. To do that, let's create here firebase.js, and also I'm going to open my console and I'm going to install Firebase. Yarn add Firebase. Okay, it's ready. Right now, let's create our web app. It's going to be chat again, or whatever you want. And as you can see, npm install Firebase. We have already done that. And this is our configuration. I'm going to copy here and paste inside Firebase. Let me close this terminal and sidebar. Okay, I'm going to clear here. Okay, as you can see, it initializes our app like that. Of course, if you want to, you can store your API key or any other IDs inside an env file, but I'm not going to do that. It can stay. Let's export this app. And I'm going to export one more thing, and it's going to be auth. We are going to call get auth function from Firebase. Let's import. It comes from Firebase auth and get auth function. Let's see actually how we can do this. I'm going to go to documentation and right here, sign in, email, password. Okay, here. As you can see, we are going to create a user using an email and password. To do that, we are going to need this function. We have already created here. We are going to call it. And after that, we are going to use this function and send our email and password. Let's do that. I'm going to open app.js and let's call register again and open up register page. So what you can do here, let's open up our app here. As you remember, we have 4 inputs here. You can create use state for each of them, or there is one more option. You can create on submit event for this form and you can reach every single input inside. What I mean by that? I'm going to come here and say on submit and let's say handle submit. Let's create this function. Const handle submit. And when we click on this button, we don't want to refresh this page. To prevent this, I'm going to say event prevent default. Let's try to see what's inside this input, for example. I'm going to say console log event target, but we have 4 targets here. I'm going to take only first one. First one and value. I'm going to open my console, write here something, sign up, and as you can see, it's here. It means we can reach every input here. Let's copy this and I'm going to say const display name, email, password, and file. Of course, it's going to be second item, third item, and fourth item, and it's going to be files, and we are going to take the first file. It's going to be a single image. Right now we can use them, but if you remember, it says we can use only email and password. We cannot send our picture or display name directly. Let's copy this and paste here. I'm going to import like that, but we are going to take this function from our file. I will say auth and I can delete here. Let's see. I will say user gmail.com, some password here. I will sign up. And it doesn't allow us that because we didn't initialize our authentication. Let's come here. And as you can see, there are many methods here. We are going to use email and password. I'm going to enable, I will save, and let's try again. Of course, we didn't write any console log or something. Let's console log this user. If I click again, it's going to be an error. That because we already have our user. I'm going to change here. And as you can see, this is our user. And it has display name, email, there's a phone number here, photo URL. So basically, we can update them later. Let's see how we can do this. Actually, I'm going to delete everything here. And I will say const response. Of course, it's an async function. So let's write here async, and we are going to await our user here. Of course, we can write here try catch block. If there's an error, we can console log, or we can basically create here error, set error, use state. At the beginning it can be false. If there's an error, we can make it true. And we can show it somewhere here. Let's say if there's an error, right here span, something went wrong. Or of course you can specify your error. And after that we can update our profile picture and display name. To do that, we should be able to upload an image. Let's come here and check for that. I will say upload image. And as you can see, we can use cloud storage. To do that, I'm gonna come here, build, and I'm gonna open this storage. Get started. It can be test for now. Later we are gonna change it. It's gonna be ready, but let's see how we can do this. As you can see, we are gonna need this function. Let's copy this and paste inside our Firebase file again. And I will say export. We are gonna use it, and let's call this function here. Like that. And after that, as you can see, we need to create a reference, and we are gonna pass in our storage and a file name, and after that we are gonna upload it like that. But there is a better example here. Let's check for it. Okay, here. As you can see, after creating our reference, we are gonna use this function. We are gonna send our reference and our file, and after that we will be able to see the uploading percentage or any error, and at the end of the process we will be able to see our URL, image URL. Let's copy this. And I'm gonna paste here. Let's take this to here. On top. Of course, we are gonna get our storage from our Firebase file. Let's say storage. In this case, we don't need here. Okay, so as you can see, we should name our image in the storage. What we can do, we can just use username, for example. So I will say display name. So if we create a user named John, it's gonna be john.png or whatever. And after that, let's clear here. As I said, we can see our percentage, but we don't need that, I think. I'm gonna delete. We can make our error handling. Let's say if there's an error, again, set error is gonna be true. And finally, if everything is okay, it's gonna return this downloadable URL. Okay, right now we have a user here and we are able to upload any image. And I'm gonna come here and update my user. I will say await update profile, and it comes from Firebase authentication. And if you are using Firebase, you should get used to this because you are gonna import a lot of function like that. By the way, of course, it should be async function. And I'm gonna pass here my user. It's gonna be response and user. And what I'm gonna update. If you remember, there is a display name here and photo URL. We can update them. I will say display name is gonna be our display name here. And photo URL will be this download URL. Let's say photo URL, download URL. But it's not enough. That because this user belongs only authentication database. As you can see, they are here, but how we can reach other people? It's not about authentication anymore. We should be able to find our friends and chat with them. To do that, after registering this user, I'm gonna save this user into another database. Again, this is only authentication. We can log in, we can register, we can update our user, but we cannot reach other people. To do that, we are gonna use Firebase database. Let's create. Again, test mode. Okay, it's ready. Basically, we are gonna create users collection here, and we are gonna add our users. Let's see how we can do this. Set a document. Add data to Cloud Firestore. As you can see, we are gonna use this function. It comes from Firebase Firestore. And after that, we are gonna write here our collection name, and it's gonna be users. And we are gonna write here any unique ID. So which ID we are gonna use? If you come here, as you can see, there is a UID here. We can use it. Let's do that. Let's copy this and paste here. I know there are a lot of functions, but there is nothing to do. And I will come here and say, await, set document, and as you can see, there is a DB here, but we haven't created yet. Let's go to Firebase, and I'm gonna come here and say export const DB and get Firestore. Let's import. It comes from Firebase Firestore. Like that. Okay, we can use it here. I will say DB, and our collection name is going to be users and unique ID. Remember, we have a user, response.user, and we can use its UID. And after that, we will write here what we are going to store. As you can see, it stores name, state, and country. We are going to store our display name, email, and photo URL. I'm not storing password, that because we are gonna use this users collection to see other users. And it's gonna be download URL. Oops, of course it should be inside this function like that. And also we can write here user ID. It's gonna be much easier to use it like that. When we fetch this user, we are gonna say only user.uid. Okay, let's see again. I'm gonna refresh. Let's say John, any password here. I'm gonna choose an image. Let's choose this one and sign up. Of course, we cannot see anything, but if we check here, I'm gonna refresh. And as you can see, it's here. Perfect. And this is our image. Let's check. Okay, perfect. It works properly. So what else we are gonna need here? And we are gonna need chat collection, and also I want to create user chats collection. It's gonna include all conversations we have. It's gonna be easier that because otherwise when we create here a chat collection, it's gonna include maybe thousands of chats, and we are gonna make a query sending our username to search for all chats belong us. Instead of that, we can basically create users chat, and its ID can be our user ID, and we can take the list of our conversations using that collection. It's gonna be much easier. So what I'm gonna do here, when we register any user, we are gonna create its users chat document here. Let's do this and you are gonna understand better. I will say one more await and set document, and I will say user chats, and again we are gonna pass here our user ID, and it's gonna be an empty object for now. That's because we don't have any conversation yet. When we register, we are not gonna have any friends here, but after, when we search for anyone and when we click on his user card here, we are gonna add this user inside this collection. And finally, if everything is okay, we are gonna go to home page. To do that, we will be using React Router DOM. Let's open up our terminal, and I will say and add React Router DOM. Let's see how we can use it. As you can see, we should wrap our app using this browser router, and after that, we are gonna write each individual router. For example, for home page, for login page, for register page. So I'm gonna copy here. And I'm gonna come here and let's delete this actually. And I'm gonna paste my router like that. And we are gonna wrap our app like that. and we can create our routes. And inside we are gonna write our routes. First one will be our home page, and whenever we visit our home page, which is index page, we are gonna call the home component. And when we try to visit login URL, let's say path login, we are gonna call login page. And for the register, let's try. As you can see, this is home page. I'm gonna go to login, perfect. And if I want to go to register, it's gonna be register component. It's that easy. So let's write here our navigation. To do that, we are gonna be using use navigate hook. Let's say const navigate, use navigate hook, and it comes from React Router DOM. Okay, so we can use this function, and after successful operation, we can go to home page, like that. Let's see. I will say user2, let's choose this image, sign up, and home page. Perfect, it works. But there's a problem here. If we don't have any user, we can still see this home page. To prevent this, we should check if we are logged in or not. Of course, you can do this inside this app, but we are gonna need this user everywhere. For example, in this navbar, when we send any message, in this chats component, that because we are gonna fetch this data using our user ID. Basically, creating here user and sending this user everywhere is not a good idea. We don't wanna make prop drilling. Instead, we are gonna use context API. Let's come here and create context folder. And it's gonna be authentication context. I will say export const auth context and create context. It comes from React. And after that, we are going to create an authentication provider, and we are going to create our user there, and we will be able to use that user inside every component in our app. Let's do that. If you are watching my channel, you already know how to use context API. I'm not going to explain again, but in the future, I want to create a video, and in that video, we are going to deep dive into this context API. Let's create our provider. I will say export const auth context provider, and I'm gonna pass here children. It represents our components, and let's create our current user using use state. I will say const current user, set current user. I will say use state, and at the beginning we are not gonna have any user. But if we are logged in, it means there is an authenticated user. So how we are gonna check it? It's really easy to do this using Firebase. I think it's the strongest feature of Firebase. You don't have to worry about your authentication. Firebase is doing everything for you. You are gonna see right now. I'm gonna create here a user fact, and I'm gonna check whether we have a user or not. To do that, we are gonna use again a Firebase function on auth state change, and we are gonna pass in our auth function, and after that we are gonna check whether there is a user or not. And if there is a user, we are gonna set our current user. Let's import this. Okay, it's not coming. I will say import this function, and it comes from Firebase authentication. Let's see. Okay, and finally, I will say auth context and provider, and we are gonna wrap our children, which is the component. And in this case, this children will be our application, and we can send anything here, value, and we are gonna send current user. It means this component can reach this current user. So any component that we wrap with this auth context provider will be able to reach this current user. So basically, we can wrap our entire application, or you can go to index file here, and you can wrap your app using this provider. I will say auth context provider, and I'm gonna wrap it like that. Let's test. I'm gonna come here and say const current user use context hook. Which context we are gonna use? We are gonna use auth context, which we have created here. I'm gonna save. Let's console log first. And as you can see, it's here. So even if I refresh the page, it's gonna be still here. We don't have to worry about cookies, tokens, local storages. Firebase handles everything. Okay, but there is something important. Remember my use effect video. If you are listening any real-time operation, you should use a cleanup function. Otherwise, it's gonna cause some memory leaking. If you didn't watch that video, I highly recommend you to watch it. It contains everything you need to know about use effect. So I will say const unsub, and we are gonna call it here. By the way, there is a white screen here. No, okay, I didn't return here. Okay, perfect. So how we can log out? There is a button here. Let's do this quickly. It's really easy. I'm gonna open up navbar, and I'm gonna create here on click event, and I'm just gonna call Firebase sign out function. And of course it comes from Firebase authentication. Let's say import sign out from, like that. And here I'm gonna pass my Firebase authentication like that, and let's see. Okay, this user is here. I'm gonna log out, and perfect. We don't have any user right now. So how we can prevent seeing this page? I'm gonna go to app.js again. I can write here a condition. I can say if there's a current user, show homepage. If there is no, show login page. But there's a better option. It's more professional. Basically, I'm gonna create here a protected route, and we are gonna check if there's a user or not. If there is not, it's gonna navigate to login page. If there is, we are gonna show any component. In this case, it's gonna be homepage. Let's say const protected route. Again, we are gonna take any children. I will say if there is a current user, if there is no current user, just navigate to login page. I will say return, and we are gonna use React Router DOM navigate component, and it's gonna redirect us to login page. Like that. Let's import this. Like that. And I'm gonna wrap my home component with this protected route. Like that. As you can see, even if we try to go to home page, it's going to login page. What about this login operation? Let's make this quick also. I'm gonna go to login page. I'm gonna do a similar thing. We are gonna have error, navigation, handle submit. Actually, I'm gonna copy everything here and paste, and let's delete here. And of course, we are gonna have only email and password. So it's gonna be 0, it's gonna be 1. We are not gonna have any file. And let's write here our event on submit. It's gonna be handle submit. Okay, let's import those React hooks like that. And we are gonna be using Firebase sign in with email and password. Let's see. Sign in, email, password. we have already created our user, and as you can see, we are going to use this function. Let's copy this and paste here. Of course, we are going to use our own authentication function, and after that we are going to sign in like that. I will say await. Let's import this, and that's all. And if everything is okay, navigate to login page. I'm gonna refresh and let's try. Actually, I forgot my password. It was 126, I think. Let's try. Okay, there is something wrong. Let's write our error actually. I forgot that. I'm gonna copy here and paste. Okay, so I'm gonna create another user. By the way, I cannot click here. Again, we are gonna be using React Router DOM, and we are gonna import link. Let's come here and I will say link and to register. So I can do the same thing for register page. Like that. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna say Jane at gmail.com 126. Let's choose this woman and sign up. Okay, there is a user, but we cannot see our homepage. If there is a user, we are gonna return our homepage, of course. Let's say children. Okay, awesome. I will log out. As you can see, we cannot see our homepage anymore. I will say Jane. Of course, it's an email. Sign in. And it's still here. Okay, we have a user. Oh, of course, homepage, not login. Okay, perfect. Of course, my password is really weak. Don't worry about that. Okay, awesome. Right now we have a user. Let's change this image and this name. I'm gonna open navbar and I'm gonna call here our current user. I will say const current user, use context and authentication context. Let's use it. It's gonna be current user dot photo URL, and it's gonna be current user display name. And perfect, it's here. As you can see, it's really easy. And if we check our DB, let's find our user here. Okay, this one. This is our user ID. And if we check here, you are gonna see that there is same ID here, and it's an empty document right now. That's because we don't have any friend. So let's take care of finding a user. I'm gonna open up. Let's close everything actually. And I'm gonna open up search. So what we are gonna do, when we search for any name here, any display name, and when we enter, we are gonna see the result here. Let's do that. So let's create here username for the input, set username, use state hook, and one more, and it's gonna be the actual user. We don't have any user yet. Let's say null, and we can create maybe error like that. So when we write anything inside this input, we are gonna change this username. Let's take this And I will say on change method, set username, event, target, and value. And when we enter, we are going to search for a user. And if there is a user, we are going to set this state. To do that, I'm going to come here and say one more event, and it's going to be on key down. And let's say handle key. Basically, it listens our keyboard actions. And when we press on enter, we are going to search for user. Let's create this function first. Handle key. If eCode equals enter, just search for user. We can create here a search function. Let's say handle search. And we can call it here like that. So how we can search any user? To do that, we are going to use Firebase query. Let's check. As you can see, we are going to need some more functions. And after that, we are going to say find the collection named stis. In our case, it's going to be users, and create a query. And here we are going to write our condition. We are going to say if display name equals username, find the user. So let's copy this and import them. I'm going to paste, and I will say import db from Firebase. Like that. So I will say const query collection. We are going to pass inside our db, and which collection we are going to reach is going to be users. And I will say where display name equals this username. Okay, and after that, using this query, we are going to search for our users like that. As you can see, we are going to use get documents, and we are going to use our query. And here it's going to return our user here. And here we can set our user. So let's copy this. And I will paste. Of course, it's going to be an async function. And get documents from Firestore. And if there's a user, we are going to set our user documents.data. Of course, we can write it inside try catch block. And if there's an error, we can set our error. Or just true. Let's use this user here. Delete this, and it's going to be user.url and its name. Of course, if we don't have any user, we are not going to return this div. I will say if there is user. And here, if there's an error, we can say user not found or something went wrong. Okay, let's try. I will say John. As you can see, it's here. Perfect. And after finding, we should be able to choose this user. So when we click on this user, we are going to add this user inside user chats. And also we are going to create here chats collection. And it's going to include all chat messages between two people. So let's create here an on click event. I will say on click and handle select. So when we click on this user div, we are going to call this function. Firstly, let's see what we are going to do. As I said, there will be chats collection here, and it's going to include the chat between two people. So how it's going to know that this is the chat between John and Jane? Basically, we can take Jane's user ID and John's user ID. We can join them together and write it here as a document ID. And after that, it's going to include messages array. And it's going to include message details. So first, check whether the group exists or not. I mean, this group is chats collection in Firestore. And if it doesn't exist, just create new one. And again, if it doesn't exist, we should create user chats for each user. We are gonna add conversation with John inside this user chat. I know it sounds complicated, but when we create and when we see it on our application, you are gonna understand better. So I will say create user chats for Jane and for John. Let's do that. It's gonna be an async function, and I will say const response and await get document. We are gonna call our DB, and we are gonna look inside chats collection, and we are gonna write here the ID of those users. We are gonna join them and write it here. Let's do this. I'm gonna write here combined ID, and we are gonna write here a logic. I will say if current user's ID, by the way, we should take this current user using auth context. So I will say const current user use context hook and auth context. Context and our context here. So we can use this user ID. I will say current user dot UID. If it's bigger than user dot UID, we are gonna write here current user dot UID plus user dot UID. If user ID is bigger than our current user's ID, it's gonna be the opposite. User dot UID plus current user ID. Like that. And I'm gonna search for this ID here. Let's say try catch. Okay, and I'm gonna write here a condition. I will say if response doesn't exist, it means if there is no chat between John and Jane inside this chats collection, we are gonna create new one. So I will say if response exists, it's a Firebase method, by the way. If it doesn't exist, I will say create chat. Remember how we are doing this. I will say await set document like that, and we are gonna send our DB here, and inside chats collection we are gonna create a document, and its ID will be combined ID, by the way. I should drop this, and after that it's gonna be empty. We are not gonna have any message. Actually, we can say messages, and it's gonna be an empty array. Okay, and after that we are gonna create user chats. But here there is something we need to know. As you remember, we are creating user chat when we register. This is our user ID, and we don't have any conversation yet. Here is empty, but when we search for John and when we click on his user card, we are gonna add it here. But not only the user, there will be also this latest message here. So basically we have user chats, and inside we have Jane's ID, and inside we are gonna have the conversation between John and Jane. So it's gonna be our combined ID, and inside this we are gonna need a couple of things. We are gonna need user information, which includes this image, display name, and maybe its ID, and we are gonna need last message. And also I'm gonna add a date, that because we are gonna sort this chats list, so it's gonna be something like that. User info is gonna include John's display name, John's image, his ID, and we are gonna have last message. Of course, we are not gonna have any last message for now, and date, and it's gonna be current date. So our structure is something like that. But how we are gonna update our user chat here? Let's come here and search for update documents. It's here, I think. Okay, it's a set function. Okay, update. As you can see, we are gonna use update doc function, and inside we are gonna write our reference, and finally we are updating it like that. But as you realize, we are gonna have some nested objects. We are gonna have combined ID, and inside we are gonna have user info. So for those nested objects, as you can see, it's here. Only thing we should do is using dot. So it's gonna be combined ID dot user info, combined ID dot date, or whatever. We are gonna use like that. Let's do that. I'm gonna delete here, and I will say await update document doc and db. By the way, there is no comma here, like that. And it's gonna be user chats, and we are gonna look for our users chat. And inside, I will say combined ID dot user info. This is how you can use a variable and a string together, and it's gonna be uid user.uid display name user.display name, and photo URL is gonna be user.photo URL. And I'm gonna add here date, again combined ID and date, and it's gonna be the current date. But we are not gonna use date.now. Instead, we are gonna use Firebase server timestamp. We are using this because it calculates different time zones and something like that. So let's say server timestamp, like that. Okay, as you can see, I'm not writing combined ID and last message. That's because when we search for any user, we are not gonna have any latest message. We are gonna add it here inside this input. When we send, we are gonna send our message to chats collection, and also we are gonna send it here inside user chats. So I'm gonna do the same thing for the other user. So it's gonna be user UID, again combined ID and other details, but I'm gonna change here. It's gonna be current user. When we see them here, you are gonna understand better. Let's see. I hope everything is okay. I'm gonna search for John. I'm gonna click. Okay, something is wrong. Okay, I forgot here. Doc. And this is not docs. Get doc. I'm gonna click again. And let's check. Okay, as you can see, this is Jane's ID. We added here the combined ID. We have a date here. We have a user info object. And later we are gonna have here the latest message. And here, as you can see, this is combined ID, and inside messages. It's empty for now. So right now we can fetch all user chat, and we can use this to fetch latest conversations. Let's do that. By the way, when we click on this user, we can close this search bar, I mean this user. So I will come here and say, let's delete this. I'm gonna say set user is gonna be null again. And also I can delete this input text. So it's gonna be set username. It's gonna be an empty string again. Let's try. I will click. Okay, user has gone, but it's still here. That's because we didn't use this value here. It's gonna be username. As you can see, it's gone. Perfect. Right now, let's delete those users. Instead, fetch them from our DB. So let's open up chats. And here, instead of those users, we are gonna fetch our conversations. So I'm gonna create here chats, set chats, use state, At the beginning is going to be an empty array, and we are going to fetch using useFact. But we are not going to fetch this data only once. It's going to be real time. We are going to actually listen this collection. So whenever something changes here, we are going to see it here immediately. To do that, we are going to use Firebase on snapshot. Let's see actually. I will say real-time get. As you can see, we are going to use this method and it's going to return us the real-time data. This is one of the best features of Firebase. Let's copy this. I'm going to paste on snapshot, document, and our DB. We are going to look inside user chats, and here is going to be current user's ID. Let's fetch this. I will say const current user, use context, and auth context. And after that, we can set our data. I will say set chats. It's going to be document and data. As you can see, there is a missing dependency here. It's going to be current user.id. And as you realize, it gives us unsub here. We should clean up. So let's see what we have. I will say console log and chats. Of course, we are going to have an error, most probably. That's because at the beginning, we are not going to have user ID. Let's see. As you can see, it's empty. To prevent this issue, I'm going to wrap this with a function. Let's say const get chats, like that. And I'm going to write here a condition. I will say if there is current user ID after call this function. Like that. As you can see, this is here, and we are going to use this user info here. But there is a problem here that because this is an object, not an array. But don't worry, we are going to convert this object into an array. Let's write here object.entries and chats. And right now, as you can see, it's an array, and this is our chat. And inside, as you can see, there are two elements. The first element is the chat ID, and the second element is object. So this is chat ID, and this is our content. So let's do that. I'm going to delete other users here. I'm just going to leave one of them. And I will say object.entries. I'm going to pass here our chats. And I will say map. For each chat, we are going to return this user. Of course, if you are using a loop, give here a unique key, and it's going to be chat and the first element. Remember, this is ID. And for other informations, we are going to use chat1. Let's write here chat1 dot display name and chat1 last message dot text. Of course, we don't have yet, but we are gonna have. Okay, image is still the same. Let's change it. Chat1 and photo URL. User info, of course. Let's choose them. User info. Okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna do, when we click on this user, we are gonna see the chat between us and this user. Basically, we are gonna store this user information somewhere, and we are gonna use it here. To do that, again, we are gonna use context API. Otherwise, we have to come here and create here user, set user, we have to send it to sidebar, and inside sidebar we are gonna send it to our chat, and we are gonna use it inside this chat component. To prevent this, again we are gonna use context. So I will say user context, or let's say chat context. And let's copy this and paste here. I'm gonna change here. Okay. But right now we are gonna do something different. We are gonna use use reducer. That because we are gonna need this user information and also the combined ID to fetch this chat. Remember, in chats collection, we are gonna search for a specific chat. To do that, we are gonna use this combined ID. So we are gonna need a state like this. User, and it's gonna include user information and also chat ID. And since this chat ID depends on this user, it's better to use use reducer here. If you didn't watch my use reducer video, I recommend you to watch it first, and after you are gonna understand everything better. So I'm gonna create here an initial state. I'll say const initial state. We are gonna have chat ID, and we are gonna have a user. Let's create our reducer. I'll say const chat reducer. We are gonna take a state and action, and we are gonna have only one action here, and it's gonna be change user. When we click on this user, we are gonna change this user. At the same time, we are gonna update this chat ID. Let's say switch action type. I'm writing switch because maybe we can add something more here. We can block the user or something like that. So it can stay like that. I will say case. Let's say change user. And we are going to return a different state. But there's a warning here that because we don't have default, I will say default. Oops, it's going to be here. And return state. Okay, what we are going to return here? Firstly, we are going to update our user. It's going to be action payload. And after that, we are going to update our chat ID. I'm going to write exactly the same thing here. Let's copy this and paste here. Of course, we don't have current user. Let's import. Use context. It's going to be inside here. That because it's a component. And after that, we are going to update this ID. Of course, it's going to be action and payload. And finally, we are going to get our state and dispatch, and we are going to send them here to use in any component. So I will say state, dispatch, I will say use reducer, and chat reducer, and our initial state here. Let's send this state. Actually, I will say data equals state, and we are going to send this dispatch. So we will be able to dispatch this action and update our user and chat ID. So we can search for index file and one more context here, and it's going to be chat context provider. Okay, let's use it here. I'm going to create one more context, and it's going to be chat context. And we are going to fetch dispatch. And when we click on any user here, let's say on click, handle select, const handle select, and we are going to update our user. To do that, we are going to use dispatch, and type will be user change. What was the name? Okay, change user. and payload will be our user here. Of course, we should send it here. We are going to send user information. Remember, chat1.userinfo, and it includes its ID, image, and display name. Of course, function like that, and we are going to take this user and pass it here like that. Let's open up chat component, and again use this chat context. That because we are going to update this name, and of course we are going to fetch user. Let's import them quickly, and it's going to be user.displayname. Okay, it's not here. Oh, okay, we sent as a data. It's going to be data.user. Of course, if there is a user, display name. I will click, and as you can see, it's here. Perfect. What about these messages? Let's open up messages. I'm gonna copy this and paste here. And let's create use state. Messages, set messages. And this time we are gonna fetch this data here. Chats, combined ID, and messages. I will say use effect. Const unsub on snapshot document RDB chats, and we are gonna pass here the combined ID. Remember, it's inside data, chat ID, and after that we are gonna take this document, and I'm gonna write here a condition. I will say if document exists, set our messages, and it's gonna be document.data. Oops. And of course we are gonna clean up, and it's gonna be data.chatID. So we can map through our messages right now, and this time it's an array, remember, so we can directly use map. I will say messages.map. For each message, just return a message component, and message will be this message, and I can delete the rest, and I'm gonna open message here and take the probe. It's gonna be message, and let's see what we have. Console log and message. I'm gonna open my console. I will click. Okay, something is wrong. Messages is not a function. Let's comment this out for now and check if we have messages or not. Okay, messages. Yeah, of course it's gonna be messages. We are fetching this document, but we didn't say messages. Okay, I will open. Okay, I can click right now, and we are gonna show them here. By the way, I'm gonna give here a unique key, and it's gonna be m.id. And here it's gonna be user ID, remember, but it depends on this message. If it belongs us, we are gonna show here our image. If it doesn't belong us, we are gonna show user image. So we are gonna need our current user here. Use context, auth context, and one more is gonna be chat context. That because we are gonna need other user, and I will say data. And I will say if message sender ID belongs to us, we are gonna show our message. Actually, let's close here for now. And first, let's type something. And after that, it's gonna make sense. How we are gonna do this, I'm gonna open input. Let's take them. And I'm gonna write here two use states. We can send a text and we can send an image. So I will say const text, set text, use state, and one more is gonna be image. And let's write here on click method. I will say handle send. Firstly, let's take our text here. I will say on change, set text, event, target, and value. And for this file, I will say on change, set file, and it's gonna be event, target, and files, and the first one. It's not file, it's image. Okay, right now we can send them. Firstly, I'm gonna check whether there's a file or not. If there is no, we are gonna send only this text. So I will say if there's a file, upload and send. I said again file is gonna be image. If there is no image, just send text. And let's see how we can update arrays. I'm gonna come here and update array. Okay, here update elements in array. As you can see, we are choosing our document here, and after that our array, in this case is going to be messages, and we are using this method array union. I will say async function, and I'm going to say await update document, db collection name is going to be chats. And here we are going to use combined ID, which is data.chatID. And inside this, we are going to use messages and array union. And we are going to pass here our message. Firstly, we should give here any unique ID. That because we are going to use it here. To do that, we can use UUID library. I will say yarn add UUID. Let's import. We are gonna use version 4. Let's say as UUID. Let's use it here. And after that, we are gonna send our text. We are gonna send sender ID. It's gonna be current user.uid because we are sending. And finally, a date. But we cannot use here server timestamp. Instead, we are going to use normal timestamp. And we are going to choose the current date, like that. And what if there's an image? Remember how we are sending image? Let's open up register. I'm going to copy here. Let's import them quickly. Our storage. And this name will be, again, it can be UUID or the current date, whatever you want, but it should be a unique name. I'm gonna import this and our image. Let's come back. I'm gonna copy this and paste here. You can handle your error here. We are gonna take this URL and send this message again, but this time we are going to send image also. I will paste, and this time it's going to be image, and this image will be download URL. Let's try. I hope everything is okay. I'm going to choose this and I will say hello, this is a test. I'm gonna send. Okay, there is something wrong. Oops. It's going to be a function, of course. And here. Okay. And as you can see, it's here. Perfect. And this is our ID. I will choose this image and test 2. And let's see. And as you can see, it's here. Perfect. It works. Right now we can take care about our messages. By the way, after sending, we can delete our image and this text. It's going to be an empty string and image will be null. But of course, we should update this site also, which is user chats. In this case, we are going to add here the latest message and we are going to send our text and its date. And we should do this both for Jane and John. So I'm going to come here and say await update document, our DB here, and user chats, current user.uid. And remember how we are updating nested objects. I'm going to say data.chatID because remember we are storing them using this combined ID. And let's say last message. And inside this, we are going to send text. And also, we are going to update this date. That because we are going to sort this list. And I'm going to say data.chatID.date. And it's going to be server timestamp. We can use it here, but we cannot use it in array union. Comma here. Okay, let's do the same thing for other user. Data.user.userID. And exactly the same thing. Let's see. I'm gonna refresh. I'm gonna choose John. Test for sidebar. I'm gonna send. Okay. And this is here. Perfect. But we cannot see it here. Let's check chats. Okay, not user info. It's gonna be just last message. Like that. Perfect. By the way, we can delete this input text. To do that, we are gonna use value here, and it's gonna be text. Okay, perfect. But how we are gonna sort those items? I'm gonna create one more user. Let's say Adam. It can be this guy. I'm gonna search for John. Sorry, we are Jane. We should test Jane. I'm gonna click. And as you can see, it's here. Perfect. Hi Jane, I'm Adam. I will send. As you can see, it's here. But this is the latest message. It should be at the beginning. And here, okay, it looks correct, but it's totally random. To prevent this, we can go to chats and we can sort this chats array. To do that, we are going to use sort method and we are going to take two examples and we are going to compare them. Remember, there is a date here. We can use it. I'm going to say .date minus b.date. If you don't know how to sort items in JavaScript, I recommend you to Google it. It's nothing complex. Okay, it's not correct. It should be b minus a. Okay, perfect. And it's here also. If we write something to John, As you can see, it's here. Perfect. But we didn't show them here. Let's open this. I'm gonna open like that. And I'm gonna write here a condition. I will say if message.senderID equals our ID, it means it belongs to us. So we can show our image. So I'm gonna say current user dot photo URL. If it's not, show users. Of course, data.user. And I can do the same thing for our class name here. Remember, we can write here owner. So I'm gonna say write here message, but also check this message sender ID, sender. If it belongs to us, write here owner. And it's gonna be text. And if there's an image, we are gonna show it here. Message.image. And of course, it should be a condition here. If there is no image, we shouldn't show it. So I will say message.image like that. As you can see, it's here. Perfect. But there's a problem here. If I write something, it still stays here, but it should scroll to the latest message. To do that, we are gonna use useRef hook. I will say const ref useRef, and I'm gonna use it here. And whenever we create a new message, we are gonna scroll. To do that, we can use useEffect. I will say dot current scroll into view, and this animation will not be sharp, it's gonna be smooth. So I will say behavior smooth. And whenever we receive any message, let's import this useEffect. I'm here. I will send a message. As you can see, it's here. Perfect. Okay, perfect. And that's all, I think. So let's deploy our application. So I'm gonna open my terminal and I'm gonna say npm run build. And it's gonna create here a build folder, as you can see. And it's gonna build the necessary files. As you can see, it's ready. Let's check. And there's an index file here and static files, which includes our CSS and JavaScript files. So it's really easy to handle that. Let's go to the Hostinger panel. And here I'm gonna choose File Manager. As you can see, there's a default page here, but we are gonna change it. Let's click here, public HTML, and as you can see, there is a default file here. I'm gonna delete this. And let's choose those files and move here. As you can see, it took just 5 seconds. Let's check our website. I'm gonna refresh. As you can see, it's here. And as you realize, our connection is secure. That's because we have an SSL certificate. Let's register. I'm gonna choose an image. And it's here. Let's find any user. Okay, perfect. And others. Okay. As you can see, it's here. Let's send this cat. And this is our website and it's here. Awesome. It works. So that's all, guys. I hope you liked it. Don't forget, it's just a tutorial. I'm not providing any complete application. Of course, you are gonna find some errors there because we are not testing anything here. But don't worry, just use our social media groups and ask your questions. And as always, if you learned something new today, please like the video. You can support LlamaDev using the link in the description below or by joining the channel. I hope I will see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.